The alien Princess Liara had always carried a weight that no one could see but everyone seemed to notice. From the moment she was born, she was surrounded by high expectations. Her family, the royal advisors, and even the citizens of the kingdom had dreams about the future of their royal bloodline. In their culture, lineage and heirs were not just personal matters. They were considered the very foundation of the kingdom's strength and stability. A royal who could not have children was seen as a failure in the most public and unforgiving way. Liara, young and graceful, bore this invisible burden every day. She had learned to smile, to nod, and to answer politely whenever someone spoke about the future, even though each word reminded her of what she could not give. Despite her royal life, Liara often felt lonely. She moved through the grand halls of the palace dressed in fine silks and adorned with jewels, yet the luxury around her did not fill the emptiness she felt. The palace was enormous, with rooms that stretched endlessly and gardens that seemed to go on forever. But all the beauty of her surroundings could not replace the simple warmth of friendship or love. Many people tried to comfort her with kind words or small gifts, but they never understood the quiet despair that came from being told every day that something was missing inside her, something she could not control. Liara spent much of her time in the palace gardens. These gardens were famous across the kingdom for their rare flowers, trees with glowing leaves, and streams that sang gentle songs as they flowed. Here, she felt a rare sense of peace. She would sit by the water, watching the ripples, listening to the birds and imagining a life far away from the expectations of her family. Sometimes she would take a book from the royal archives, dusty old tomes that described distant planets, human civilizations, or the strange, curious lives of people beyond her own world. She loved reading about Earth in particular, a planet the royal scientists had described as wild, unpredictable, and full of emotions that seemed both beautiful and confusing. Liara was fascinated by the way humans lived, loved, and sometimes struggled. She dreamed of feeling that freedom, that unpredictability, even if only for a short time. Her daily routine was strict. Royal lessons began early in the morning, teaching her languages, history, politics, and the complex rules of court life. The tutors were skilled and demanding, pushing her to excel, to always appear perfect, to maintain the dignity of her position. But in private, Liara allowed herself small moments of rebellion. She would skip a lesson to wander the gardens or sneak a few hours reading about Earth and the humans who lived there. In those moments, she felt alive in a way that the palace rarely allowed. She imagined walking on Earth's green fields, laughing freely, and meeting people who did not know her as a princess, who would not judge her by her ability to produce an heir. Yet even in her private moments, the shadow of her supposed barrenness followed her. Royal advisors often spoke in hushed tones about the importance of finding a solution. Ancient remedies, medical experiments, and even unusual alien treatments were suggested, each more invasive than the last. Liara endured every test with quiet dignity, never letting her frustration show in public. At night, when the palace was still and the corridors were silent, she allowed herself to wonder, why me? Why do they see only what I cannot do and not who I am? She longed for someone who would look at her and see the person behind the title, the girl who laughed softly at the sunlight on the flowers, the dreamer who imagined worlds far beyond the stars. Liara's relationship with her family was complicated. Her parents loved her in their own way, but their love was always intertwined with expectations. The king and queen were proud, ambitious, and deeply committed to the kingdom's legacy. They had hoped for grandchildren to continue the line of rulers, and every conversation that mentioned heirs was a reminder to Liara that she had not yet fulfilled her duty. Her siblings, who often seemed carefree and less burdened by the weight of royal responsibility, could not fully understand the pressure she faced. They tried to comfort her, but their words often felt hollow and she retreated inward, relying on her own imagination and her few trusted friends within the palace. Even her closest friends in the court were cautious. They wanted to support her, but did not know how to ease the weight of a label that had followed her since childhood. Every smile and laugh had to be measured, every movement observed. Even the smallest mistake could be remembered for months, and the whispers of doubt seemed never-ending. Liara learned early how to navigate these challenges, how to present the image of a perfect princess while keeping her true feelings carefully hidden. But inside, she felt trapped. She dreamed of freedom, of love, of a life where she could be seen for herself rather than for what she could not give. Despite all this, Liara was not without hope. She found strength in small joys, watching a flower bloom, reading about the lives of humans who face challenges far greater than hers, listening to the gentle music of the palace fountains. She began to understand that even though the world expected one thing from her, she could still choose how she felt, how she dreamed, and how she lived. Her curiosity about Earth and its people became a lifeline. It was more than just fascination, it was hope. If humans could live freely, love openly, and find happiness despite hardships, perhaps she could too. Liara's story was only beginning. The princess, once thought powerless to shape her future, carried within her a quiet strength. Every day, she learned a little more about herself, a little more about the world beyond the palace, and a little more about the possibility that life could surprise her in ways she could never imagine. In the solitude of her garden among the flowers and streams, Liara dreamed not just of escape, but of connection, of a life that might one day be filled with joy, laughter, and even love, something the royal court had never promised her. Little did she know that soon, an unexpected visitor would arrive from a distant world, someone who would see her not as a princess burdened by duty, but as a person, as a companion, and perhaps as something even greater. And in that moment, the course of her life and the kingdom itself would begin to change in ways that no one could have predicted. The arrival of the human ambassador on Liara's planet was unlike anything the royal court had experienced in decades. His name was Daniel, and unlike the other visitors who had come from distant worlds, he carried no airs of superiority or sophistication. He was tall, with a gentle smile and curious eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. From the moment he stepped onto the palace grounds, it was clear that he did not fully understand the strict protocols or expectations of the alien court. Guards whispered among themselves, advisors frowned, and even the palace staff exchanged worried glances. But Liara noticed something different in him. He did not seem impressed by titles, jewels, or palace grandeur. Instead, he appeared genuinely interested in people and places, in the little things that others often ignored. The first time Liara saw him, she was walking in the palace gardens, her favorite spot for quiet reflection. Daniel was leaning over a rare flowering plant, turning it gently in his hands and murmuring to himself in a language she did not fully understand. Most people in the court would have dismissed his behavior as strange or careless, but Liara felt an unexpected flicker of amusement. Here was someone who did not take the palace too seriously, who seemed more curious than cautious. She watched him from a distance, noting how differently he moved through the world, less guarded, more open, more human in a way she could not define. Their first conversation came by chance. Liara had been wandering near a small stream when Daniel accidentally stumbled into the path, almost tripping over the intricate stone bridge. He looked embarrassed but laughed quietly, a sound so sincere and warm that Liara could not help smiling herself. "I'm sorry," he said, his accent strange but soft. "I didn't mean to intrude," Liara replied with a polite nod, expecting the usual awkward silence that followed her interactions with strangers. But Daniel continued to speak, asking simple questions about the gardens, the plants, and even the patterns of sunlight through the trees. He did not bow excessively or address her by her full royal title, which shocked her advisors who happened to be nearby. Yet to Liara this felt like freedom. She did not have to be perfect, she did not have to perform, and she did not have to hide her curiosity or amusement. Over the next few days, Liara and Daniel began to encounter each other frequently, sometimes by accident, sometimes by design. Each meeting was a small adventure. They explored quiet corridors, hidden balconies, and even secret alcoves of the palace that were rarely visited. Liara was amazed at how easily Daniel adapted to the alien world without losing his own sense of self. He asked questions not to show knowledge, but to understand. He laughed at the unusual customs, not mockingly, but with genuine delight at their novelty. Slowly, Liara found herself looking forward to his presence more than she expected. Daniel, too, noticed Liara in a way that no one else in the palace did. He saw her not as a princess burdened by duty, but as a person, someone who laughed softly at small joys, who carried a quiet sadness beneath her composed exterior, and who had a curiosity and intelligence that was often underestimated. In a court where every smile was measured and every word was weighed, Daniel's openness was like a breath of fresh air. He treated her as an equal, a companion, not as a figure to be worshipped or observed. For the first time in many years, Liara felt seen, truly seen, not for her title or her supposed failings, but for who she was as an individual. Their growing friendship did not go unnoticed. The palace staff began to whisper, advisors raised eyebrows, and even the king made quiet inquiries about the human ambassador. Some were suspicious, fearing political complications or breaches of protocol. Others were simply curious about what drew the princess, long regarded as serious and reserved, to spend so much time with a foreigner who seemed so different from anyone they had ever met. Yet Liara did not care about whispers or judgments. For the first time, she allowed herself to enjoy life without constant self-monitoring, to laugh, to joke, and to feel excitement in her heart without fear of disapproval. Their conversations grew deeper over time. Daniel asked about her dreams, her favorite stories, and even her thoughts about Earth, which she had often imagined but never discussed openly. Liara found herself sharing more than she ever had with anyone else in the palace. She told him about her longing to experience life beyond royal duties, her fascination with humans and their unpredictable emotions, and the quiet pain she carried from years of feeling judged and constrained. Daniel listened patiently, never interrupting, never offering empty sympathy. Instead, he asked questions, encouraged her curiosity, and sometimes simply nodded, giving her the space to speak freely. One evening, as they sat by the stream, watching the reflection of twin moons in the water, Daniel reached out and lightly touched a flower that Liara had been admiring. "You take care of this place beautifully," he said quietly. "It feels alive, like it has a soul just like you." Liara felt a warmth in her chest, a flutter of emotions she had not felt in a long time. It was not flattery, not a courtly compliment. His words were simple, honest, and sincere. In that moment, she realized how rare it was to meet someone who could make her feel seen and valued for who she truly was, not for the title she carried or the expectations placed upon her. As weeks turned into months, the bond between Liara and Daniel strengthened. They shared laughter, curiosity, and quiet moments of reflection. Liara began to feel emotions she had thought were impossible for her to experience: joy, excitement, and a budding affection that made her heart race. Daniel, too, found himself drawn to the princess in ways that went beyond fascination with her world or her royal status. He admired her strength, her intelligence, and the resilience she had shown in living a life filled with pressure and expectation. Despite the joy their friendship brought, both knew the challenges ahead. Their bond was unusual, even unprecedented. The court was filled with whispers of doubt, skepticism, and concern. Marriages between humans and alien royals were rare, and many questioned whether such a connection could survive the scrutiny of tradition and duty. Yet neither Liara nor Daniel allowed these doubts to dictate their feelings. Instead, they focused on the connection they had found, a rare, genuine companionship in a world often ruled by appearances and expectations. In the quiet corners of the palace gardens, away from the eyes of the advisors and the court, Liara began to imagine a life different from the one that had been laid out for her. A life where she could love and be loved freely, where her worth was measured not by her ability to produce heirs, but by the depth of her heart and the strength of her character. And in Daniel, she saw the possibility of that life, not as a distant dream, but as a real, tangible future that might one day change everything she had ever known. Little did they know that their growing friendship was only the beginning. The arrival of the human ambassador would set in motion a series of events that would challenge traditions, defy expectations, and ultimately alter the destiny of the princess, the ambassador, and the entire kingdom. What began as curiosity and companionship was slowly evolving into something deeper, something neither of them could yet fully understand, but both would come to realize could change their lives forever. As Liara and Daniel spent more time together, their friendship began to deepen into something neither of them had expected. It was no longer just the curiosity of a princess fascinated by a human visitor, or a human ambassador intrigued by an alien world. There was a quiet understanding growing between them, a bond that felt natural and comforting, like two people finally finding someone who could understand the unspoken parts of their hearts. They laughed together at small accidents, shared stories about their past, and found comfort in each other's presence. For Liara, it was a revelation. She had spent so long hiding her true feelings, obeying rules, and meeting the expectations of the court that the idea of being seen as herself was almost frightening, but also exhilarating. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens under the soft glow of the twin moons, Daniel stopped and looked at Liara with a seriousness she had rarely seen in him. "Liara," he said, his voice gentle, "I've spent time in many places, met many people, but I've never met someone like you. You are kind, intelligent, and you make me want to be better, to think differently about the world. I don't care about titles, and I don't care about expectations. I just want to be with you." Liara's heart raced. She had imagined many scenarios where she might feel love, might feel desire for connection, but never had anyone spoken to her so honestly, so without reservation. For a long moment, she simply stared at him, feeling a mixture of joy, fear, and hope. Her mind flashed to all the warnings, all the rules, and all the whispers of the court. How could a human like Daniel, someone from a distant, so-called primitive world, ever fit into her life as a princess? And yet, she could not deny the truth of her own feelings. Over the next few weeks, the palace buzzed with the subtle tension of change. Liara's smiles were brighter, her movements lighter, and the court could not help but notice. The advisors whispered among themselves, concerned about the influence of a human on the future of the royal family. Some warned of scandal. Others feared the political complications that might arise from a union so unusual. The king himself, always serious and deliberate, began to take quiet note of the princess's happiness, though he said nothing openly. He watched from afar, observing the sincerity in Daniel's actions and words, trying to determine if this was a fleeting fascination or something more profound. Liara, meanwhile, found herself struggling with her emotions. She had never imagined proposing marriage to anyone, let alone someone from a completely different world. In her society, proposals were formal, arranged, and guided by tradition, not by personal desire. And yet, the idea grew stronger in her heart. Daniel saw her not as a princess defined by her duties, but as a person with dreams, with intelligence, and with a capacity to love freely. She wanted to give him the same trust and affection, to declare that her life could be shared with him, in a way no one else could understand. Finally, one quiet afternoon, she made her decision. They were in a hidden alcove of the palace gardens, surrounded by rare flowers that glowed softly in the fading light. Liara took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't want to wait for tradition. I don't want to follow a path chosen for me by anyone else. I want to be with you, if you will have me." Daniel's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with warmth. He reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Liara, are you saying what I think you're saying?" "Yes," she replied, her voice firmer now. "I am asking you to marry me, not because it is expected, not because it is convenient, but because I want to share my life with you. You make me feel alive, and I want us to face the future together, no matter what challenges come." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The gentle rustle of leaves, the soft glow of the flowers, even the distant palace walls faded into the background. Daniel's lips curved into a smile filled with awe and joy. Liara, I've wanted this, dreamed of this, but I never imagined you would ask me, yes, I will marry you. The decision, though simple between them, sent waves through the royal court. When the king was informed, he was initially silent, his expression unreadable. Advisors hurried to explain the complexities, the potential issues, the dangers of breaking tradition. But the king, ever observant, could see the genuine connection between Liara and Daniel. He noticed how her eyes sparkled in a way they had never done before, how her laughter came easily, how her presence seemed lighter and more confident. Slowly, he began to understand that the happiness of his daughter could not be measured by tradition alone. The announcement of their engagement caused whispers throughout the kingdom. Some were shocked, unable to comprehend how a princess could choose a human over the carefully arranged alliances her family had considered. Others were curious, wondering how the bond between two such different beings could survive the scrutiny of court and society. Yet amidst all the speculation, there was also a sense of admiration. Liara had chosen her own path, asserting her will in a way that few royals dared. She had taken control of her life, defying expectations, and in doing so, inspired others to reconsider what was possible. Preparations for the wedding began, though in a manner far simpler than traditional royal ceremonies. Liara insisted that it be personal, intimate, and filled with meaning rather than spectacle. She and Daniel wanted the day to reflect their connection, their mutual respect, and the joy of their love, rather than a display for the court. Advisors and palace staff worked tirelessly to balance tradition with the couple's wishes, ensuring that while the ceremony honored the kingdom's customs, it also celebrated the unique bond between a human and an alien princess. Through all the planning, Liara remained calm in a way she had never been before. She found strength in Daniel's presence, in his unwavering support and affection. She no longer felt the crushing weight of expectation that had dominated her life for so long. Instead, she felt hope, excitement, and a sense of liberation she had never known. Her dreams of freedom and connection were becoming reality, and for the first time she could imagine a future filled with joy and possibility. When the day of the wedding arrived, it was unlike any other event the kingdom had witnessed. Friends, family, and dignitaries gathered, some with skepticism, some with genuine curiosity. Liara and Daniel exchanged vows that were simple, heartfelt, and filled with promise. They spoke of trust, love, and the desire to face the future together, regardless of the challenges that might come. As they stood side by side, the princess and her human companion looked at each other, not as a royal and a foreigner, but as two individuals who had chosen one another freely, with courage and love. By the end of the ceremony, even the most skeptical advisors had to admit the happiness radiating from Liara was undeniable. She was no longer the quiet, burdened princess who had walked through palace gardens in solitude. She was radiant, confident, and filled with hope. And Daniel, once an outsider in a strange world, had become a partner, a friend, and someone who had brought light into her life in ways she could never have imagined. The union of Liara and Daniel marked the beginning of a new chapter, not only for them, but for the kingdom itself. It challenged traditions, expanded minds, and demonstrated the power of genuine connection over expectation. And though the future still held uncertainties, one thing was clear. Their bond was strong, their love real, and together, they were ready to face whatever came next. Liara and Daniel settled into married life with a sense of ease and happiness that surprised everyone around them. Life in the palace continued as before, with advisors, ceremonies, and endless duties, yet something had changed. Liara no longer moved with the careful caution of someone constantly under scrutiny. She laughed freely, explored the palace with curiosity, and shared quiet, joyful moments with Daniel. The human ambassador had become more than a husband. He was a companion, a partner, and the one person in the galaxy who could make her feel truly at peace. Months passed, and the kingdom gradually grew used to their union. Some citizens were skeptical, wondering if such an unusual pairing could last. Others quietly admired the courage of the princess who had chosen her own path. Liara and Daniel, however, paid little attention to gossip. They focused on each other, their shared curiosity, and the small joys of everyday life. They walked through the palace gardens at dawn, visited rare collections in the archives, and often sat by the gentle streams, speaking of dreams, stories, and possibilities. Each day seemed brighter and more hopeful than the last. Then, the impossible happened. Liara discovered she was pregnant. At first, she could hardly believe it. Years of medical tests, treatments, and assumptions had led everyone to believe she was barren. Yet here was undeniable proof that her body could give life. The news shocked her, filled her with joy, and also brought a surge of worry. How would the kingdom react? How would her family respond? Would people see this as a miracle, or would they struggle to understand it? She hesitated to tell anyone, keeping the secret close to her heart, sharing it only with Daniel. When she finally told him, he held her hands and looked into her eyes, speechless at first. Then a smile spread across his face, wide and full of warmth. "Liara, this is incredible. A miracle," he said softly. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes, feeling a happiness she had never imagined. The two of them embraced, knowing that their lives were about to change in ways they could not yet predict. The thought of becoming parents filled them both with hope, excitement, and a gentle fear of the unknown. Word of Liara's pregnancy eventually spread through the palace. Advisors and family members were stunned, and the king, who had always been cautious and measured, could hardly believe it. For years, he had considered his daughter's supposed barrenness a problem, a limitation, even a threat to the royal lineage. Now that worry vanished in an instant. He summoned the palace doctors and scientists to confirm the news, and when they did, astonishment turned to awe. Liara, the princess once labeled infertile, was carrying an heir who would continue the royal line in a way that no one had predicted. The news brought excitement and hope to the kingdom. Citizens celebrated in quiet whispers and discreet gatherings, amazed at the miraculous child that was to come. Some speculated about what traits the child would inherit. Would it resemble humans, aliens, or a combination of both? Others wondered if the heir would have powers or abilities beyond ordinary expectations. For Liara and Daniel, however, the details mattered less than the simple fact that they were about to bring a new life into the world, a life born from love, trust, and connection. Throughout her pregnancy, Liara experienced both joy and challenges. She marveled at the changes in her body, the small kicks of movement, and the growing presence of life within her. Daniel supported her constantly, attending every medical checkup, helping her through discomfort and ensuring she never felt alone. He learned the intricacies of alien medicine, the customs surrounding royal pregnancies, and even the rituals of the palace that had once seemed so distant and daunting. Together they faced every obstacle with patience, care, and mutual respect. As the months passed, anticipation grew. The kingdom waited with bated breath for the birth of the heir. Stories circulated of the miraculous pregnancy, and the court began to prepare for the arrival of a child who would be unlike any other. Liara, though sometimes nervous, remained calm and focused, knowing that she had the support of the one person who truly understood her. Daniel, equally excited, promised to stand by her side no matter what. They spoke often of the future, imagining the child's first steps, the first words, and the life they would create together as a family. Finally, the day came. The palace was filled with quiet tension and anticipation. Royal physicians and attendants prepared for the birth, while advisors and the king waited in respectful distance. Liara, supported by Daniel's presence, faced the labor with courage and determination. Hours passed, and as the palace held its breath, the princess brought forth a healthy, beautiful child. The baby was a perfect blend of human and alien features, a living symbol of unity, love, and hope. The king, who had long doubted the princess, was overwhelmed with emotion. He gazed at the child, then at Liara and Daniel, and realized that the kingdom had witnessed something extraordinary. In that moment, all fears, doubts, and expectations melted away. He declared the birth a miracle and publicly acknowledged the love and connection that had made it possible. Citizens rejoiced, advisors expressed admiration, and the palace was filled with an energy of celebration and wonder. Liara held the baby close, tears streaming down her face. Daniel stood beside her, smiling with pride and amazement. Together, they marveled at the life they had created, a life that defied expectations, challenged traditions, and brought hope to a kingdom that had long needed it. The princess who had once been labeled barren was now a mother, and the human who had once been an outsider was now an integral part of the royal family. In the weeks that followed, the child became a symbol of love's power to overcome barriers. The kingdom adjusted to the new reality, inspired by the story of Liara and Daniel, and began to embrace the idea that happiness, courage, and genuine connection mattered more than rigid traditions. Liara, Daniel, and their child formed a close, loving family, showing the world that miracles could happen when hearts were open and love was true. Months passed, and the child grew, healthy and curious, bringing light and laughter into the palace. Liara and Daniel watched with wonder as their baby explored the world, learning, playing, and bringing joy to everyone around. The princess, once constrained by expectations, now moved through life with confidence and pride. She had faced judgment, fear, and uncertainty, and had emerged victorious, not through power or status, but through love, patience, and courage. The kingdom slowly transformed as well. People began to question old assumptions, realizing that tradition should not overshadow happiness and that love could cross boundaries that once seemed impossible. Liara and Daniel's story became an inspiration, a legend told quietly in conversations and celebrated openly in ceremonies. They demonstrated that connections forged through respect, understanding, and affection could achieve what was once considered impossible. The king, who had once doubted his daughter, now stood proudly beside her and Daniel, acknowledging the miracle their family had created. He spoke openly about the importance of love, courage, and open-mindedness, using the story of the princess and her human husband as a lesson for the kingdom. Liara, Daniel, and their child became a symbol of hope, bridging worlds and hearts, and proving that even the most impossible circumstances could lead to extraordinary outcomes. Together, the family looked to the future with optimism. The child represented not just a continuation of the royal line, but the promise of a new era, one where love, understanding, and compassion guided the kingdom more than fear and rigid tradition ever could. Liara, once thought barren, had created life. Daniel, once an outsider, had become family, and the kingdom, once skeptical and rigid, had learned to embrace the unexpected. Their story was one of miracles, courage, and the enduring power of love to transform lives.